Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes to give everyone that has signed up a chance to join. But good afternoon. I hope you're all well. We'll just wait a couple of minutes and then we'll get going. Hello, Mary from the Wirral. I've actually been to the Wirral. It's very nice. Hello, everyone else that's just joined. We're just going to wait one more minute to allow other people to join. Let us know in the chat where you are joining from if you like. Got Sam from Germany. Mary, I'm trying to remember the name of where I went in the Wirral. Hopefully it'll come to me by the end and I'll let you know.
Poland, Vancouver,
Yeah,
Colombia.
very cool. I wish I was somewhere else other than London because the weather is rubbish today. But I can't complain too much because we have, on the whole, had a good summer. Switzerland, nice. Okay, I think we'll get cracking. So we have plenty of time for questions at the end. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon. My name is Helen, and I'm one of the customer success managers at Conductor. Pretty much I guide prospects through the sales process and on to hopefully becoming a client. You'll also see me at any of the conferences and exhibitions we attend on our stand. So if you are planning on attending the BCI World in November, come and say hello, please. I'm joined by Charlie, who is the customer success lead currently at Conductor. And amongst many other things, he is responsible for the Conductor Academy, as well as overseeing kind of the whole training program for both new and long-standing clients. One thing I'll add, one thing that Charlie, in my opinion, does best is help translate client ideas into realistic, immersive crisis exercises. So that's why he is here today, the perfect person for today's topic. So thank you for joining us, Charlie.
All right.
Our fireside chat today, there's no fire. It's actually quite warm, so I'm glad there's not, is on designing for the future. And this was inspired by the fact that more and more of our clients are looking at doing exactly this, creating exercises set in the future. Now, for some, and I sometimes think this as well, it may seem that we have enough to contend with in kind of the present day, but various aspects. I've got some questions around how to make future scenarios realistic and relevant to today. How future scenarios stretch our thinking in different ways that kind of current risks do. Charlie will also, I hope, give us an insight into creating believable and immersive simulations. But first, I'd like to start with a question that first sprang to mind for me, and I'm sure is the case with lots of people on the call today. Not how we design for the future, but why. So, Charlie, what are your thoughts on why we should look at threats that are 10, 20 years into the future when there are plenty of things to keep us busy in today's setting?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think it's a good place to start asking why. I think a lot of people assume that when you think of designing an exercise for the future, that you're thinking about predicting what's going to happen. You're trying to forecast and predict,
Yeah.
what events are going to happen 10, 20, 30 years down the line. But that's not really the goal. I
Mm,
guess those future exercises that we create and run give you sort of a lens for exploring what you don't know about today. And it sort of really opens your mind and allows your teams and your organizations to see how we think, how we plan, and also where our blind spots are. So
okay.
when we create future scenarios, we are not trying to guess what's coming, what's going to happen next. We're basically, I guess the aim is to create these controlled environments to stress test our assumptions. And I
Right.
think what's so great about it is we essentially are dropping participants into this unfamiliar territory and we just see what breaks and what essentially. And I think
Yeah.
just to start off with an example, um, in order like thinking about a future scenario,
Yeah.
possible scenarios. I mean, for example, a an AI suing for legal personhood is
Mm,
one example, and I think some people may be thinking this does sound quite far-fetched, quite
yeah.
ridiculous, the fact that an AI is suing
Yeah.
legal personhood, but I think if you were to run that, what actually happens is you sort of see, would your playbooks hold up? You got to ask these questions. Would your teams know what to do? Would what the communication's going to be like between your team? And I think what will be interesting is that there'll be lots, I think you'll notice lots of gaps. And I think
Mm,
essentially these future scenarios help you sort of sharpen your readiness today. And I think even though sometimes these future scenarios are slightly exaggerated, um, they sometimes reveal the biggest gaps in people's systems, playbooks, and things like
yeah. That makes sense. Thank you. In my mind, I can imagine um, that these type of scenarios kind of provide quite a fresh, exciting space to look at some of the like core tenets of crisis response, things like communication, collaboration, and especially decision making in like a very new environment. Would you say that there are ways in which future scenarios stretch our thinking or um, kind of better prepare and mold our skill set that maybe more familiar risk areas don't?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So I think with future scenarios, I think they're just totally different from traditional exercises because I mean I imagine a lot of people on this call at the moment do run exercises. For those of you that do, I imagine that the traditional sort of exercise it's almost in a sense like a drill for some people, and it's a lot of
Mm,
muscle memory from your participants.
yeah,
And I think the difference with designing exercises for the future is you're dropping them into this unfamiliar future. There is no script for them to follow. There's no sort of muscle memory there. And suddenly you are relying on their improvisation, their sort of ethical judgment, their emotional
yeah,
resilience, and also just their general decision making. And I think in sort of day-to-day general traditional exercises, those sort of aspects don't really get tested as much as they should. So I think
yeah.
by dropping your teams in completely, sort of unfamiliar environments, you're really able to see how the dynamic, how they basically handle this between them and monitoring their behavior and monitoring their emotions is something which we'll touch on hopefully later on.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, I think there's a lot of insight that can come from dropping people in this unfamiliar
Yeah.
environment.
So you're kind of like forcing people to realize that maybe they've relied upon and been planning around potentially quite rigid assumptions and scripts and things like that, be it about tech or behavior or public opinion, and you're
Mhm.
throwing them into this new environment to really see how they would deal with a completely new type of crisis.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, to be honest, in a lot of people's minds, they probably think that if you're preparing like for today's conditions, then you're well prepared. But
Mm,
to be honest, that is just not the case.
yeah,
So we do need to, yeah, plan for these sort of future scenarios.
yeah. Um, so if I wanted to start looking at how to create a future scenario, I haven't myself done one yet. Where do I begin? What should I keep in mind from your experience?
So there's there's quite a, if you go quite deep, there's quite a lot to it. So we'll start off, I guess, with probably the most important thing if you were to create a future scenario, and that is probably believability,
Hmm.
because it doesn't matter how wild your future concept is, if the rest of the world doesn't feel grounded and your participants don't buy into the story, then
Yeah.
you're going to struggle. So I think an example, I think, is probably quite a good example to sort of better understand this is an episode from Black Mirror. Hopefully,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
just going to check here, 36 people in the chat. I'm really hoping that some of you have seen this episode. And if you have seen this
Is
episode, please
is it
let
in
us
the
know.
most recent series season?
I believe so. I believe
Oh,
it
I
is the
haven't
most.
seen it.
Well,
No spoilers, please.
unfortunately, this is a spoilers.
I think
But
it's been out for long enough for me to, yeah, to hear about it now. It's my own
it's
fault.
to be honest, it is. I mean, I find Black Mirror amazing, and the storytelling in it is incredible. But
Mm.
there's this one episode where a woman has this brain injury, and there's this tech company that basically can that their technology allows you to stream part of the brain back to her self basically from the cloud. It
Oh,
sounds like a bit ridiculous. And then
yeah.
a few months in, she basically starts blurting out these adverts
No,
mid-conversation. So mid-sentence, she'll be promoting dishwasher tablets, things like this. And I think
no.
it basically turns out that the subscription she's on, she needs to upgrade in order to get rid of the ads. So
Gosh.
what is, and just to sort of bring us back to the topic of conversation, the reason why I thought this was so interesting is because it is ridiculous, first of all, the concept, but it works. And the reason it works is because the sci-fi part, which is the brain streaming, that's the absurd idea, but that's completely balanced and sort of counteracted with the idea of the subscription model that is painfully familiar for a lot of us, that the scripts that
Yeah.
we need to upgrade, we've all probably been nudged into upgrading to something at some point. And it's that sort of familiarity that makes us feel grounded and almost makes it believable. And I
Mm.
think the one thing this episode does really well is it nails what we call like the one big lie. And basically, the one big lie is, in theory, when you're creating these future scenarios, you change one aspect or one element and you keep everything else the same. And
Yeah.
the reason for that is you need everything else to be recognizable. So you don't need silver robots, hoverboards, a new language. You just
Yeah.
need one sort of bold change that feels plausible, sort of wrapped in this world that everyone already sort of knows and is
Mm.
familiar with, essentially.
I think I would definitely fall into that trap of thinking, right, if we've progressed enough for her to stream her brain, then we would be progressing with like all these other things, like you say, hoverboards and stuff. But it's too far-fetched for people to to tap into and take seriously enough to engage, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like you don't need, you don't, when you think of the future, I mean, when you think of futuristic movies, you think of flying cars and robots,
Mm,
but you don't need those things to say you're in the future. You just need one to have one big sort of lie, and everything else, it basically exactly the same.
yeah,
And that's enough for people to feel like it is real, I guess.
yeah, that makes sense. So once you've got your one big lie, how do you make the rest of the scenario? You've touched upon keeping it grounded, but how do you make the content believable enough for people to engage?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, and I think this is probably where quite a lot of people get stuck in the sense that there is this sort of instinct from I guess from a lot of people to sort of flood the scenario with these with a lot of detail, timelines, dumping lots of information on people, and they sort of feel like that's what realism is. It's providing all that detail, but
Hmm.
that detail is not the same as plausibility. And I think the real question that we should be asking is not, is this accurate? But it's, do your participants believe this enough to care, basically?
Mm,
And I think there was a study done a few years ago. I believe it was for crisis leaders, and I think it was 70%, 68, 70% of crisis leaders said that they rely on gut instinct and emotional
mm,
cues just as much as hard facts when making decisions. So basically what I'm trying to say is if your scenario only sort of talks to the rational brain, you're basically missing half the picture. You know, you've really got to play into people's emotions,
yeah,
understand what makes them tick. And again, hopefully a bit later on in this discussion, we'll talk about the emotions and the behavior of participants and how this sort of feeds in with future scenarios.
yeah. I mean, I can completely relate to that statistic because especially in unknown new scenarios, I would I would go off instinct and kind of gut feeling a lot more than maybe I should, but I'm not the only one clearly.
Mm.
Um, so you need to kind of, yeah, keep that in mind, I guess, when designing your scenario. It's not all about the detail.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the again, this sort of emotional relationship people have to the crisis, they rely on that a lot. And I think,
Yeah,
as we'll touch on later, the designing a future scenario that plays into people's emotions and you know really creating an exercise that makes people feel something, not just
yeah,
them ticking a box saying I've done this and this, but making an exercise that yeah emotionally makes people tick.
yeah,
It's and then analyzing their behavior in the exercise is, in my opinion, a way more valuable insight than if they've ticked a box or done
yeah.
this, for example.
You're more likely to remember it as well if all those emotions are tied
Exactly.
to that training.
Exactly. Exactly.
Um, so if I want to bring in this kind of emotive aspect to my scenario and, of course, set it in the future without worrying about how much detail there is or as much as I would maybe do originally. How do I do that? What's like a step-by-step guide to bring
Yeah.
in emotions?
So sort of, I mean, I guess this is the same answer to like how do you create future scenarios, but it's almost like you've got to have different pillars, I guess, to be able to start to be able to support the exercise. So without these pillars, you're going to struggle basically. So I think the three pillars that come to mind are familiarity, facets, and consequences. So we can go through each one. I think if we start with familiarity, this is something which is crucial basically. We need to give people things that they recognize. And this goes down all the way to the small details. So if you're creating like a fake email, for example, the tone of that email, who it's coming from. Is it all these small details will have a massive impact.
Mm.
Maybe out of offices, maybe making sure that not everyone is available in the exercise, simulating sort of calendar invites, all these sort of minor things which we don't think of that are essentially a normal part of people's day-to-day life can have such a massive impact on the realism. And it's those small moments that really make people feel grounded and make them think this is real. And
Hmm.
I always think in every organization, there's something that's very familiar to everyone in a certain way. And even if it's Monday morning, there's always the same employee that says hello or
Yeah.
greets people in a certain way, whatever it is, or if it's a certain spam email that everyone gets, whatever it is, just putting these things into the exercise can have such huge impacts because people it makes them feel like this is real, this is happening,
Hmm.
and then they're engaged, they're emotionally engaged. So that's the sort of familiarity aspect, I guess.
Yeah.
Second aspect, facets, and this is super important. The key here is basically not to tell them what the world looks like. We don't need to describe, like if we're in a future scenario, let's say we're 20 years down the line, what I
Mm.
wouldn't do is say, oh, it's 2045, this has happened, this has happened, this has happened, this has happened, and tell them what it's like now in 2045.
Yeah.
You should show that happening. And by showing, you should be using different sorts of in different ways. So whether that's voices, whether that's like phone calls, voicemail messages, breaking news, websites, fake social media feeds, all these simulated internal communications, fake press releases, all these kind of things should be in there and help participants piece together what is happening
Yeah.
without sort of needing this sort of explanation of being told specifically up front.
Yeah.
I think that's super important. Uh,
Hmm.
and last but not least, before I stop talking, is consequences. And this is one I think a lot of people do leave out, and I understand it's easier to leave it out. But any action or any decision which participants make in the exercise, ideally, we should see the consequences happen, and they should be able to see what the consequences of their actions are happen, and that should happen live in the exercise. So if they, you know, give a wrong response, if they delay and things get escalated, they should see the impact that that has.
Hmm.
And I think otherwise it's sort of just passive learning. They need to sort of see the world around them and the exercise
Hmm.
change depending on what they do.
Yeah. I think that last one is 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 so important, but also so tricky to like find the time and the correct consequences for those actions. And sometimes you don't know what those consequences are going to be until you're in the exercise. So
Mm.
it's a tricky one. But was it one of your clients, Charlie, that for trying to kind of tick the box of familiarity, um, they got some members of the wider organization outside their like um, crisis management team to kind of write up some emails so that it really sounded like the same
Yes.
tone and kind of
Yeah.
thing that people, yeah,
That was quite a interesting point.
yeah,
I think a lot of, I mean, even at Conductor and a lot of our clients, when they create the content and they're like injects, I guess, for the exercises, a lot of people now use AI to create that content, which is great.
yeah,
And of course, providing AI with context and examples, we can get good messages. But what this client did differently was that for their exercise, they actually asked the sort of CEO, the other stakeholders that weren't participants, and asked them to write these sort of injects and emails
mm,
in their tone of voice, the way they would write it. And if I'm a participant and I see an email from my CEO in an exercise, if it's written, and I know how our CEO
yeah,
writes, I know the exact tone, and if that tone was off, it would have me
It wouldn't
questioning,
feel. Yeah.
and it wouldn't feel like I feel like, well, this isn't real. That's not him, is it? You know, you immediately, yeah. So it was really interesting that they've actually got those stakeholders to write the emails themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so let's say you've got your future scenario
yeah.
and you've followed all the steps that you've so kindly shared with us. Um, how do you know it's working? How can you kind of look at it and say, yeah, that's being um,
Mm,
received well and is actually, doing its job?
hmm. I think the way you know it's working is, and this kind of follows back to my early point, is the emotional side of it. So what you're looking for in your participants to know it's working is emotional signals and emotional cues. So are they pausing before they reply to that email? Are they, how do they look? How's their body language? Do they look anxious? Do they look scared? Do they look uncertain? Are they sort of debating about ethics rather than just tactics? These types of things. And I mean, I know some people monitor, there's a one client that monitors participants' heart rates in an exercise as well, and they get their participants to document how they're feeling at certain points in the exercise. So instead of documenting, oh, this is what I've done this, I've done this, they say, well, this is how I'm feeling. And they're able to then reflect afterwards about how that exercise made them felt. But ultimately, analyzing the behavior of your participants is such a valuable insight, which I think is underlooked and
Mm,
underrated, the sort of value we can get out of that. And ultimately, especially with these future scenarios, as we're dropping people in there into this unfamiliar world, they are going to be faced with that uncertainty, maybe anxiety, the stress of it, especially if we've got a well-designed exercise that has those pillars. And
mm,
ultimately, if in the future, when they are put in a situation where it's unfamiliar, chances are it's not going to be the scenario that we've created, but at least emotionally they're prepared and they've
yeah,
emotionally experienced and been in this unfamiliar territory before, and they're
yeah,
probably going to be able to better respond and adapt because of they've potentially experienced these emotions before in the similar environment.
yeah, absolutely. Because I think rightfully so, people get so kind of caught up on or focus primarily on the data around like have people ticked these boxes or followed
Mm,
these certain procedures, and it's easy to forget about more of the emotional resilience side of things.
yeah.
um and I guess also it's not only knowing maybe how you yourself react in these unknown um, scenarios, but also being aware of like where um, other people's strengths and weaknesses maybe lie in, particularly
Mm,
for like C-suite leadership. It's a good way of saying, right, so and so maybe can't deal as well with something completely new and unknown, and we need to support them in
yeah,
how to get better at that. And then maybe some other people will come out um, kind of doing better than you thought. But
exactly.
so
Yeah.
you're kind of putting more focus on the people than the content in this case.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, definitely. And I think by focusing on the people, you do get, we've had heard from clients before sort of say, their participants have said, oh, is this actually real? And I think it's
Mm.
when they're sort of questioning if this is actually happening or not, you sort of know that they're in their mind, it's sort of crossed over from just an exercise to actually an immersive experience.
Yeah,
But yeah,
it feels good when that happens.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay, my next question is a little more broad and I guess applies to both future and current scenarios. Um, One thing that a lot of people worry about, I hear this a lot from new prospects in particular, looking to kind of transition from traditional tabletop methods over to a simulation tool, is how do you bring in this uncertainty and let people train and kind of discover a scenario that involves a lot of uncertainty without overwhelming people to the point where maybe they, remove themselves from the scenario
Yeah.
completely.
Um, I think this is a very common concern in the sense that, I mean, we all want our exercises to feel real, but if you do throw people in to like the full blown sort of like chaos straight away, then it will backfire. It can backfire, and participants might panic, they might disengage and shut down completely. So I guess what we need to do is, and this is what we recommend to a lot of our clients, is we gradually ease people in. So
Yeah.
we always start with this sort of business as usual phase where we sort of just simulate their day-to-day life essentially. And even if this is for 10 minutes or so, we're sort of easing them into the environment they're in. And with future scenarios, especially, you will never be able to avoid that uncertainty that exists within them because they are uncertain and participants won't be expecting that. But the trick, I guess, is to stagger or sort of structure the uncertainty in a way that is manageable for your participants. So letting people know the sort of what the boundaries are. You can make the content confusing. You can have unclear reports, maybe like a badly worded WhatsApp message, maybe a rumor that goes around. But the format of the exercise shouldn't be confusing. Like people should know how to act. People should know, uh,
Hmm.
even if they don't understand what's happening. So I think one of the ways, sort of what feeds into this, is the pacing of the exercise. So
Hmm.
there's no need to throw everything at once because again, that might cause overwhelmment, panic, and shutdown. We can start slow. We can sort of, if we need to hold their hand at the start, we can hold their hand at the start. We want to create an environment that our participants feel supported in, essentially, because what we want them to feel is that they can fail and that this is not a game that they have to win. The goal isn't for them to be perfect. It's to basically expose how they work under pressure, help them understand where their blind spots are and what assumptions they're sort of carrying. So I think
Hmm.
when people know that that's why they're there, then they stop stressing about getting it right.
Yeah.
But I think it depends on, again, this could be taken much deeper in terms of the maturity level of the audience, of the participants, and different maturity levels will need different levels of hand holding. And we adapt that as well when we create exercises. There's some exercises where people will give them their sort of plans and these sort of documents at the start. They say, here's all the stuff. Some
Mm.
people will say actually they should know where to find that already themselves. So we're not going to tell them. They should know
Yeah.
what to do those things. So it is making sure that you adapt to your participants as well. And also,
Hmm.
as I've said, the pacing, gradually sort of implementing the sort of chaos throughout, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Would you say, I guess this feeds back a bit to the importance of consequences. Like, would you say it's important before those consequences are shown to make it clear what actions people can take to some extent? Or do you find that on the whole, clients kind of leave it up to the participants to decide what to do?
Yeah, so it's a great question actually. So it's actually really quite interesting because obviously I do work with a lot of clients. I do see a lot of different exercises, like a lot,
Mm,
and it's really the different ways people create them. There's almost like two sides to it, right? So you've got one side, and you've just described both, but the one side is where you do give participants the freedom to respond, like the freedom to respond, the freedom to react, how they're going to react, and sort of decisions they make. You sort of leave them to it. the other side of it is a little bit more of a controlled environment, but you sort of encourage active participation. This is where you give them options. So we have some clients that will actually give them predefined options, and they've said, okay, like you've got A, B, C, and D, here's your choices. Which one are you going to go down? Based
Mm.
on that choice, then there'll be repercussions, there'll be consequences that you see.
Yeah.
So I think the downsides of giving sort of multiple choice options is that it does take away the realism a little bit. However,
Yeah.
it does encourage active participation. Um, and I guess the moment that the participants make a decision and then they see that that decision has had an impact in some way, shape, or form, then that's what makes it feel immersive and realistic for them, is that
Yeah.
they can see my choice is having an impact here. You know, I think if it's not having an impact and they're not seeing that, then gradually people will maybe disengage and not feel like it's that real.
Yeah. I guess there's no one size fits all because
No,
of
no, no, no.
the the variations in participants, maturity, and
Mm.
everything else you've mentioned. So it's hard to know maybe what's best that first time you train a group, but that's part of the game, isn't it? Trying to work out how best to do
Mm.
it. Um,
Sorry, I just see something in the chat. This
oh
is
yeah,
this is where having observers at exercises
can
can add
add value.
value.
I guess that was when we were talking about looking at emotions, not just the
Oh, yes, sorry, I didn't realize the time. That was 23 past. Sorry about that, Mary. Yeah, so
mm,
no, probably, yeah. So having observers, um, which is something a lot of our clients do. Yeah, I mean, the observers can actually, their job can be also to monitor participants' behavior and observe them essentially.
mm, yeah.
And whether you come up with some sort of emotional scale or something to observe. But yeah, it's really interesting.
So I think given the time, I'm
Hmm.
going to pause it there and ask people in the chat or on the Q&A to add any kind of thoughts on what we've already spoken about. If you have any experience um, designing or running future scenarios, feel free to add your thoughts on how that's gone, or if you have any particular tips. But equally, if you haven't done something like this before, please feel free to add, any reservations you might have or reasons why you're not currently doing this. It would be really interesting to hear your insights. Equally, if you have any general questions about crisis simulation, conductor, feel free. Is anyone currently kind of running future scenarios or planning on?
Or even if anyone's got any ideas of any
Yeah,
future scenarios,
good,
even if it sounds
good one.
crazy, we're keen to hear any wacky ideas.
Mm,
Because I think you can have
yeah,
a lot of fun with this future when you create future scenarios. You can have a lot of fun with it.
yeah,
Obviously ensuring that you don't change the whole world.
yeah.
But yeah.
Oh, I think got a few questions coming through.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see those because they're in the oh, there's a
Q&A.
Q&A
They've just
section.
popped up. So we've got what's the best scenario for first timers? This is a tricky one. I guess it really depends, doesn't it, on what we were saying, like the type of participant group, what business function and role they fall into.
I think, yeah, so in terms of like a for first timers, there's no in terms of the type of scenario, of course, that's obviously down to you in terms of like the way that you create it. I would say for first timers, you don't feel the need to go right the way to the end and try and be, really sort of dive in at the deep end, basically. You can start off with a pretty simple exercise where that has sort of, in terms of like the role players that you maybe have in the exercise and those sort of like, as I mentioned earlier, showing those consequences. You don't need to worry about, you know, showing every single little thing, but just sort of touching on those parts, having a little bit of simulated fake social media, some fake articles. You don't need loads of stuff, but the stuff you do put in there, just make sure that you're really selective about what you show your participants. Every inject or every piece of content that you put out should have some sort of purpose and meaning, in my opinion. And we do see a lot of exercises that show a lot of noise, I guess, and like people on social media, like talking about celebrities and gossiping about all sorts of stuff, totally unrelated to the exercise, but they want to make it feel more real. One of the most common mistakes that we see is that everyone goes way too far over thinking, oh, let's create all this fun content. But actually, if you go too far over, you can end up overwhelming people straight from the start.
Mm.
And when all you were trying to do is make it more realistic. So I think just keeping it simple to start with and gradually improving as you move forward is a strategy that a lot of our clients sort of take,
Mm.
especially when looking at if they're new to scenarios or new to conductor, for example.
Yeah. I think people fall into the trap of thinking, oh, I must make sure there's enough for people to do, but maybe underestimate how long it takes for people to digest new information, to kind of pull together all their different thoughts and conflicting ideas, discuss it with one another, and then actually come up with a response to the crisis or what their next steps are going to be. So
Mhm.
that, as you say, you don't need that much, especially for first timers.
Mm.
Um, we have another one in the chat that says any tips, suggestions, or recommendations on how we could hold an exercise when people are all remote.
Mhm.
What
So,
would, yeah,
sorry,
go
go
ahead.
on. Oh, uh, any tips, suggestions, recommendations on how we could hold an exercise when people are remote? Um, yeah, so interestingly, I mean, there are a lot of our clients run exercises when people are remote, and I think
Mm,
the I guess the reason, first of all, why they do it is because a lot of people are remote, and what's the point in doing an exercise if you're pulling everyone into the office when in reality that's not going to happen? So
in a real crisis, yeah.
yeah, so in terms of like with people being remote, I know that we have clients that have sort of breakout rooms and things like that. I think obviously with Conductor, what a lot of our clients do is they get everyone to log in to the software and everyone has their own virtual desktop. So even though there's lots of emails to do and things like this, things happening in the environment, they then on the call, it's a chance to discuss things verbally. And I think the
Mm,
breakout rooms, if you've got different teams or groups of people, you can maybe have them all in the main room and then at different points in the exercise break out and the communications teams goes off and discusses. There's different ways of doing it. I think it's maybe a question I'm slightly less able to answer in the sense that all of our
mm,
clients use Conductor. So I feel like I can only give Conductor sort of
yeah.
examples with obviously people using the software. I saw one other question. How do we create a scenario that can cover all the functions that are actors in a specific
Mm.
process, e.g., from business operations to HR, facility, IT, etc., while still being engaging? Um,
Got to use conductor pretty much.
I'd say like making sure that I think in terms of engaging all those different, groups of people as well in one exercise, you've almost, first of all, the storytelling has got to be there. You've got to have a good, which is obviously what a lot of conductors about is storytelling. You've got to have a compelling narrative that keeps everyone engaged. But second of all, collaboration. You've got to find a way to get your participants from those different areas to communicate and talk to each other. And the way to do that is really there's two ways. The first way is to make sure that the content that you send out is role specific content, that you feed certain people information that you don't feed others. And that way people are forced to communicate between each other because not everyone has the same information, which is the same as that would be in a crisis. But also, you know, having almost like a ripple effect. So if something affects the IT team or something, having a ripple effect on the HR people or something, and having this sort of almost maybe like a sort of flow chart that's sort of mapped out on how everyone's going to be affected and we'll have to communicate. It's a tough question though. I think it's a really good question. But yeah, role specific content will it
Mm.
and basically force people to collaborate and share stuff between them.
I guess as well with that, you can include certain injects that will prompt people to involve others. You know, if you know that you're going to deliver role specific content to IT that is providing them information around maybe what operations need to know at some point, you could send an inject operation saying something like, you know, IT will have this information, so reach out to these
Yeah.
individuals. If you think that they need the hand holding to do that, um, but equally you can leave it up to them to find out who they need to contact. Because I know that part of a big part of training is making people aware of who to get involved in certain crises, because that's the first step that a lot of people struggle with.
Mm.
Um, any other questions or general thoughts? Please go ahead. In the meantime, I think I've just thought of another question for you, Charlie.
Yep.
Is is there something that you thought like wouldn't be around today 5 years ago? Like 5 years ago, what was something science fiction that now is just normal?
Um, I mean, other than general AI, I think
Mm,
for me it's probably the voice sort of not just the visuals, but the voice generation and the voice cloning. I think f like 5, 10 years ago, the idea of cloning someone's voice with
yeah.
and when all you need to have is a minute sample of their voice, and then you can clone and text to speech in that voice and tone, whatever you want to
Mm,
say, would sound ridiculous, but and sort of deep fakes, it all sounded quite ridiculous, but now it's becoming more normal. Uh,
yeah.
and I think it in terms of creating exercises with that, it's not something that I would imagine many people are going to be able to make use of in the sense that if I'm creating an exercise, I'm not going to be able to ask um, the CEO or other employees of other companies for a snippet sample of their voice so I can clone it. They're probably not going to be comfortable with that. But yeah, I think I mean, all the chat GPT, the sort of Mid Journey, 11 Labs, all these AI generation tools are just incredible.
Wild.
And the power if you use them correctly, is extreme. And I think, and I know we're going slightly off course here, but one of the biggest mistakes, I guess this feeds into when you're creating future scenarios, a lot of you may use the AI as like a tool. And I think the biggest mistake a lot of that we see with a lot of clients as they use the AI in general, even just start using ChatGPT, is that they don't provide enough context. So we need to make sure that the context is fully provided if we want to get appropriate answers, and our the way that we prompt should be specific
Mm,
and detailed. Otherwise, the answers you're going to get are not appropriate. I remember um our founder sort of said to treat the AI like an intern, and he said
yeah.
if you ask the intern for biscuits, they're going to come back with rich teas, for example. What and really you should say, I want custard creams or bourbons or whatever it is, and you've got to
Chocolate, please.
clear with your demands to the AI exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. We have another question.
Yeah.
I think this is one for me, finally. It asks, what is the pricing model? Can we just use the Conductor platform to create our own scenarios and experiences? Yes, you can. A lot of our clients do that. So they will purchase an annual license, which allows you to run and create as many exercises throughout the year. And they take that away and do whatever they want with it, create as many crazy futuristic scenarios as they like. Um, so yeah, if you have any more questions about commercial things, I might pop my email in the chat in a second. I'll do it now so that you can get a hold of me. Any other questions before we wrap things up? Or just kind of like your general experiences in training and crisis exercising? It would be really interesting to hear what you're currently doing.
And even if there are no more questions, hopefully you have found this useful in some way and
Mm,
insightful, maybe thought-provoking as well. And
yeah.
hopefully there'll be some practical things you can take away from this that you can try and implement if you dare to create a future exercise.
Yeah. I think it's just something fun as well, even if it doesn't hit all the training objectives maybe that you're aiming to test. Um, it's just something a bit different, isn't it? And
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
to freshen things up. I'd like to do one. Oh, I think we have another. Oh, yes. I will share the Conductor website as requested in the chat. 1 second. Oh, we have another question. What would be the best way to test a crisis communication plan with with executive members? Um, I'll say one thing before Charlie jumps in. Um, I think what we see a lot with our clients when training for C-suite members is that they don't want them to be as hands-on with the software as more operational teams traditionally are. So what Charlie mentioned earlier, the virtual desktop that simulates things like email, internal comms, websites, social media, and all sorts, whatever you really need. Um, that is more suited to operational. We do have another option for C-suite, which is more of a dashboard and lends itself to more discussion-based exercising. So it's still a kind of vast improvement from your traditional tabletop methods, things like PowerPoint, because the content is still being delivered through these realistic channels in a more engaging and immersive way. So you can have breaking news and, Twitter popping off with customer complaints and all this sort of thing. Um, Maybe prompting questions through email, but it's for everyone to see on a shared screen, and then you're allowing them to discuss in a way that they're comfortable and used to, and in a way that's probably more realistic to how they would deal with a real crisis. So I would say that's, in our experience, the best way to to train executives.
Mhm.
Charlie, do you want to add anything?
To be honest, I think you've basically said a lot of what I would have said. I think
Mm,
with the executives as well, a certain client in mind runs a lot of exercises with executives, and they quite often change halfway. I think it's halfway through the exercise, they like change roles. So they swap
Mm.
roles. So they basically, like if someone's a CEO, they swap that round. And I think, um, I guess this is a good practice for all exercises, but specifically for executives, if the crisis ever comes round and that specific executive is out of office on holiday or, elsewhere, unwell,
Mm.
someone else will need to step into that role. So um, that's something you can do to sort of, I guess, spice things up a little bit as well with the
Yeah.
executives. But also, like when you're thinking about executives, and I guess there's two sides to it, but like I guess it could be argued either way. I was gonna think, I was basically gonna say like, don't have exercises that are really like way too long, basically. But sort of more like shorter, more impactful exercises could be better. Although having said
Mm.
that, I do know a client that's just run a 10-hour exercise with about 8 executives. So
10 hours
yeah, 10-hour scenario.
over 2 days, I assume.
No, no, it was in one day.
Woo.
It was in one day. But again, the purpose of that is because these crises can run on for hours, and people need to remember to eat. People need
Yeah.
to remember to drink, stay hydrated. These types of things. Otherwise, and that I think that was probably a lot of the purpose of it was to, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Cool. I would have liked to be a fly on the wall at that particular one at points, maybe not through the whole thing. Um, yeah. Someone
Um,
has just
yeah, sorry,
asked,
let's have a
yeah,
look. Is it?
uh,
Oh, it's on the Q&A again.
yes. Someone has asked about Dora. Um,
A lot of this crisis exercising is becoming mandatory for
mhm.
organizations to run. Are you planning to come with specific offerings that cover the mandatory scenarios as per DORA? And for DORA being, as I've just checked, Operational Resilience Act, which is coming into force, which is interesting. So basically new regulatory requirements.
Yeah.
Um,
So we'll have to check with what we currently have and plan to come out. But I think it's likely that we have a place called Ventura that has templated exercises that you can kind of adapt and build upon and add to. But I think we probably have a good collection of things that would cover the majority of those mandatory scenarios. And if we don't, then
Definitely, yeah.
it will be for
Absolutely.
sure that we're planning to add any ones that don't cover it. But
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
yeah,
I think even on our Ventura website, we've got about 8 different cyber attacks
yeah.
scenarios, for example, different types of cyber attacks. So, yeah, as Helen said, if it's not there, it's probably coming.
Mm.
But yeah, great.
Yeah.
So I think with a few minutes to go, we can wrap it up and leave it there for today.
Yes. Thank you so much for all your wonderful insights, Charlie.
Well, thank you, and thank you to the BCI for having us
Yeah.
again.
And to everyone who joined, thank
Yes,
you for your questions and um, saying hello where you're from at the start. That makes me happy. So we have, oh, I did send the website.
I think if I add it now, I think
Oh, I had to send it to everyone. That's what I'm doing wrong.
yeah.
Could you also send my email to everyone, Charlie?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maura. Thank you, Sunil.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a good rest of your day. We might have had another question. Oh, yeah. Take care, everyone. Thank
Thank
you,
you as
Ismail.
well.
Any other questions, feel free to reach out to us on our website or directly via email. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks, Camelia. Thanks, Philip.
That's good to hear.
Great. Thank you, Darian. Thanks, Sir. Sorry, I can't. I'm really struggling to pronounce your name. Sidar. Thank you, Sidar. Thanks, Aina. And oh, there we go.
Sure.
Oh, Shridar. Oh, thank you. Perfect. Thanks, Jose.
Right. I think we'll leave it there. Thank you,
Great.
everyone.
Perfect. See you guys later. Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye.